In this section, we will be discussing the movement of matter through different cycles, including the carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, and hydrologic cycles. Let's begin with the carbon cycle. Carbon is a major component of organic molecules like carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. It makes up about 20% of our body weight. The processes that drive the carbon cycle are photosynthesis and respiration. Producers take in carbon dioxide in the form of CO2 from the atmosphere during photosynthesis and incorporate the carbon into their tissues. When organisms respire, they release CO2 back into the atmosphere. Decomposers play a key role in the carbon cycle by breaking down dead organic material and returning CO2 into the atmosphere or water. Carbon is also exchanged between the atmosphere and the ocean. Some of the CO2 in the ocean is used by algae for photosynthesis. Other CO2 combines with calcium ions to form calcium carbonate, CaCO3, which precipitates out of the water and forms limestone and dolomite through sedimentation and burial. Over millions of years, organic matter can become fossilized and turn into fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas. The extraction of these fossil fuels doesn't alter the carbon cycle, but their combustion does. Tiny sea plants and animals that died 300 to 400 million years ago were buried on the ocean floor. Over millions of years, heat and pressure turned them into oil and natural gas. Today, we drill down through the layers of sedimentary rock to reach these deposits. Human impacts have significantly altered the carbon cycle, particularly since the Industrial Revolution, which led to an increase in fossil fuel usage. Today, about 30 billion tons of CO2 are released per year due to human activities like transportation and electricity production. This excess CO2 in the atmosphere increases the retention of heat, leading to global warming. It also makes the oceans 30% more acidic. Additionally, tree harvesting contributes to this by releasing the large amount of carbon stored in trees back into the atmosphere. Moving on to the nitrogen cycle. The Earth's atmosphere is about 78% nitrogen gas, N2. The first key process is nitrogen fixation, which converts nitrogen gas into a usable form for producers. This can be a biotic process where bacteria converts N2 into ammonia, NH3, which is then converted to ammonium, NH4 plus, that producers can use. It can also be an abiotic process where lightning and combustion convert N2 into nitrates, NO3 minus, which falls to the ground in precipitation. The development of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers has also led to large crop yields. Nitrification is the conversion of ammonium in- into nitrite and then to nitrate by bacteria. This diagram illustrates the nitrogen cycle. Assimilation is when producers incorporate these usable nitrogen compounds into their tissues. Mineralization, also known as ammonification, is when decomposers break down dead organic matter and waste, converting it back into inorganic ammonium. Finally, denitrification is the process where bacteria convert nitrates back into nitrogen gas, which returns to the atmosphere. Nitrogen is a limiting nutrient in most terrestrial ecosystems. Human activities such as adding nitrogen into the soil through fertilizer can increase atmospheric concentrations where the fertilizer is applied. Leaching can also transport dissolved nitrogen molecules through the soil into groundwater. The phosphorus cycle is also a key biogeochemical cycle. Phosphorus is a major component of DNA, RNA, and ATP. It is a limiting nutrient second to nitrogen and is also commonly added to fertilizers. Unlike nitrogen, phosphorus rarely changes form and is most found as phosphate, PO4 3 minus. The processes of assimilation and mineralization also occur here, where producers take up inorganic phosphate from the land and water and use it in their tissues. Decomposers then convert waste and dead organisms back into inorganic phosphate. The movement of phosphorus through the environment involves sedimentation, geologic uplift, and weathering. Phosphorus is now very soluble in water, so much of it precipitates out in the water and settles into sediments. These sediments can then be uplifted into mountains where weathering of the phosphate rocks slowly releases phosphorus back into the terrestrial and aquatic habitats. Phosphorus is held tightly by soil and is not easily leached into water bodies. However, even a small amount of transfer can have big impacts on aquatic ecosystems. Human impacts in the phosphorus cycle include mining phosphate sediments from mountains to produce fertilizers. This runoff from agricultural lands can lead to algal blooms in an aquatic ecosystem. When the algae die, decomposers consume large amounts of oxygen, which can cause the water to become hypoxic, creating a dead zone. Historically, household detergents also contain phosphorus. Here is a diagram of the completed phosphorus cycle as discussed. Now for the hydrologic or water cycle. Plants release water from their leaves into the atmosphere in a process called transpiration. Evapotranspiration is the combined amount of water lost to the atmosphere from both evaporation and transpiration. Water vapor then cools to form clouds, and precipitation falls back to the earth as rain, snow, or hail. Evaporation pulls water back into the atmosphere. Runoff moves water across land surfaces into streams and rivers. Human impacts include harvesting trees, which reduces plant biomass and therefore evapotranspiration, leading to increased runoff. Humans also divert water from one area to another for drinking, irrigation, and industrial uses. Here's a completed diagram of the water cycle. This should be familiar to you from your previous classes. Finally, we'll touch quickly on the sulfur cycle. Sulfur is a component of proteins and is important for allowing organisms to use oxygen. Most sulfur is stored in rocks and is released into soils and water as the rocks weather. Producers then absorb it through their roots as sulfate ions, SO42-. Natural sources of atmospheric sulfur in the form of sulfur dioxide, SO2, include volcanic eruptions. Bat and bird poop, also known as guano, also contain a lot of sulfur. Humans add sulfur to the atmosphere when burning fossil fuels and mining metals, which produces sulfur dioxide. When SO2 mixes with water, it is converted to sulfuric acid, which can then become part of rain or snow as acid precipitation. Here's a completed diagram of the sulfur cycle as we discussed. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you guys tune in for the next video on movement of energy.